So today we're having a look at the BMW G310GS and the Royal Enfield Himalayan. So make sure you guys stick around for the entirety of the video so that you can make an informed decision on whether you want to buy one bike or the other. So recently we've been seeing a development in the motorcycle market where adventure touring has come to this new segment of smaller motorcycles. Now I'm not talking about motorcycles like the KTM Duke 390 because that is not an adventure bike. I'm talking about bikes like the Royal Enfield Himalayan and the BMW G310GS and something that'll come out in the future, the KTM Adventure 390. These are the kind of bikes that I'm talking about. Dual purpose. They're not only meant to be ridden on the road, but they're also highly capable when it comes to off-road riding. So it's the kind of companion that you need to be able to take you from wherever the hell you live to wherever the hell you want to go without any restrictions. So I'm highly excited about this range of motorcycles, and that's why I keep talking about it, because they're just so frigging fun to ride. Anyway, so the BMW G310GS comes with a 313cc single-cylinder liquid-cooled engine, whereas the Royal Enfield Himalayan, a 411cc air-cooled engine. The BMW produces 34 horsepower at 9,500 RPMs, whereas the Royal Enfield only produces 24.5 horsepower at 6,500 RPM. When it comes to torque, the Royal Enfield Himalayan is far superior because it's capable of producing more torque at a lower RPM. And that's basically what Royal Enfield were going for. They were going for a more of a touring bike, a more of an off-road capable bike. And that's also seen in the Royal Enfield's ground clearance. It's got a higher ground clearance, and that's because it's got a 21-inch front tyre and a 17-inch rear tyre, whereas the BMW's only got a 19-inch front tyre, therefore bringing its ground clearance down. The amazing thing about the Royal Enfield Himalayan is they've been able to retain a similar seat height, 31.5 inches, whereas the BMW's got a 32.9 inch seat height. So the Royal Enfield Himalayan, once again, they've catered to the shorter rider who wants to go off-road a lot. Does it sound like they're targeting a specific demographic there? Yes, it does. The BMW, because of its outstanding horsepower, 34 horsepower, it's capable of propelling the bike from 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in only 7 seconds. Whereas the Royal Enfield takes up to 11 seconds. And that's not the only case. When it comes to top speed, the BMW 143 kilometers per hour and the Royal Enfield 125 kilometers per hour. So obviously the BMW produces much more power, which just goes towards the riding enjoyment on that bike when you hit the roads. Really, on the BMW, when I was hitting the roads and just going around the twisting corners and just every turn I would take, it was just so fun to downshift and then slowly and surely accelerate through the turn. And then as I was coming out of the turn, I would just go full blast, like now, and oh my God, the freaking sound of that bike. If you guys haven't noticed, I'm just getting more and more excited as I'm talking. I'm getting so freaking excited just talking about the BMW. Not only is the design amazing, they've just executed the manufacture so well. I mean, there's no reduction in the quality, in the standards. Just because it's produced in India, one might assume that the quality has been reduced, but no, it has not. The quality is on par with anything that BMW would produce in any country. And the same goes for Kawasaki, for example. Kawasaki being a Japanese company, however, their engines are produced in Thailand. Basically, when it comes to motorcycle companies nowadays, parts are manufactured in different countries and then it's all brought together. So it doesn't really matter nowadays because they're following a blueprint, they're following a design, and that design can be replicated in any factory. So back to the BMW, it's got an 11-litre fuel tank and the fuel efficiency 30 kilometers per litre. The Royal Enfield, on the other hand, it's got a 15-litre fuel tank, which is much more better for long distance motorcycle riding, and it's got a better fuel mileage of 36 kilometers per litre. So therefore the Royal Enfield, when it comes to fuel efficiency, is far superior. One thing I really love about the BMW is that it comes standard with ABS, whereas the Royal Enfield, it's an optional extra. I highly believe in ABS because when it comes to safety, you cannot risk having crappy brakes. You've got to have top of the line brakes because you don't know in what kind of split second you need to make a decision. So when it comes to the looks of these bikes, the BMW on first appearance has got a sports-like appearance, yet it still retains its adventure touring-like seating position, which I just love the mixture of both. I love it how it can combine both, and by combining both, not only does it have a really good looking bike, but it's got great handling and a great cornering ability. On the other hand, the Royal Enfield Himalayan, a highly comfortable seating position, and on first appearance when you look at the bike, it looks like it's got everything to do with adventure. It basically just looks like a dirt bike. Very simple design, which also makes doing maintenance on the bike even easier. Whereas the BMW's got fairings and things like that, stuff that you would have to remove before doing maintenance on the bike. The Royal Enfield, which basically looks like it's naked almost, you can basically just get straight into the bike and identify components. My friend Tunda was able to fix the Royal Enfield Himalayan when we had issues with it within like 5 minutes. He just pulled it apart like a pro. And that's something that's great when you're doing adventure riding, because you need the capability of pulling the bike apart and getting to whatever you need to get to fix the problem. So basically the pros of the BMW, it comes with ABS. It's got a decent acceleration and top speed, which makes it highly enjoyable to ride. It goes as hard as it does on road as it does off road. It's got an electronic display that shows the gear indicator and the fuel range. And basically anything you need to know about the bike is displayed on the electronic display. Now when it comes to cons, it was actually really hard to think of anything wrong with the BMW. Because the bike is so fun to ride, I think I've become blind to any issues with it. People online have been complaining about it having some kind of vibration issue when you exceed 90 kilometers per hour. But personally, when I rode both the BMW G310GS and the BMW G310R, which are basically the same thing, I had no vibration issues whatsoever. I even took it on the highway, took it well above 90, up to 100 and 110 kilometers per hour, and I had no vibration at all. So I don't know how people are experiencing these issues. Maybe it's something that could come about from riding the bike a lot. But as far as I'm concerned, I didn't have those issues at all. But the only con I could find with the BMW was that it wasn't as comfortable when you adopt the standing position on it. Because when you're standing on the BMW, the handlebars are still a bit low. So you kind of have to bend your back down a bit, which I'm not a fan of. I like to keep that straight back, like you're trying to thrust into the air. Okay, now back to the Royal Enfield Himalayan. Pros: highly fuel efficient, great fuel capacity, highly comfortable, and just a killer when it comes to off-road performance. The Royal Enfield Himalayan, man, the stuff I could do on that motorbike when I went to the Himalayas, and the amazing traction that it had off-road. Basically, I believe the Royal Enfield Himalayan was designed with just off-road trails in mind, and they've done a great job executing that. Now when it comes to the cons, the Royal Enfield Himalayan, not too powerful, the acceleration is really slow, the top speed is really low, and the sad thing about that is it kind of feels like you're riding a tractor. So when you're riding on the road, I personally got really bored just riding on the road, and when you need that power to overtake a car or a truck, it really lacks. And when I was riding it in India, because there's a lot of single lane roads, so you got to quickly overtake another vehicle, and there's like a vehicle coming in the opposite direction. You need that power to quickly overtake and get ahead of that vehicle. And the Royal Enfield Himalayan put me in some situations where non-experienced riders would definitely have been nervous. But I still had faith in the bike, and it got the job done. And one other thing I found about the Royal Enfield Himalayan is the instrument cluster. I'm not a fan. It kind of looks like it's all over the place. It's not really structured, it's kind of confusing, and they've tried to include electronic components, like an electronic display, into the analog component, which Basically just looks like they didn't know what they were doing. And one thing that makes me feel like they didn't know what they were doing was because when it comes to the gear indicator, it wouldn't even tell me if I was in the right gear, because I'd be in the second gear and he thought I was in the third gear, and then I'd be in the third gear and he thought I was in the fourth gear, and vice versa. I just got confused on which gear I really was in, and that's a bit concerning. Like, come on, it should be able to know. So now I'm just gonna have to rate these bikes to give the clear winner. I'm gonna rate each bike in 4 separate categories: performance, efficiency, comfort, and riding enjoyment. And now, not in that order, let's start with the Royal Enfield Himalayan. So when it comes to performance, I gave it a 7 out of 10 because the Royal Enfield Himalayan really lacks when it comes to on-road performance, acceleration, and top speed. And the figure would have been much lower. It would have been about a 5 out of 10. But because of the off-road performance, it bumped that figure up, and that's why I got a 7 out of 10, because the off-road performance is just outstanding. And that leads us to the next thing, the riding enjoyment. So riding enjoyment is severely affected with the Royal Enfield Himalayan just because it's not a quick bike, it doesn't have enough power. I know it's not designed for power, but really it gets really boring riding on the road with the Royal Enfield. Like, just on the highway, you know, you're revving it pretty high in 5th gear because it's only got a 5-speed transmission. In 5th gear, you're already like at the top range of the RPM spectrum, and it's revving out at 100 kilometers per hour, and it just feels like it's struggling. It's not enjoyable at all. So sadly, 7 out of 10 for that one. But when it comes to efficiency, 9 out of 10, because it was highly fuel efficient, 36 kilometers per liter, and a 15 liter fuel tank. So that can take you for a long time. And it did for me. I could ride it for like 12 hours without even having to fuel up. And then finally, 9 out of 10 for comfort for the Royal Enfield, because it is up there when it comes to melting my balls on the seat, just like the Kawasaki KLR 650 does. So mate, I love it, 9 out of 10, and therefore bringing the total 8 out of 10 for the Royal Enfield, which is a pretty damn good rating. Now let's move on to the BMW. The lowest rating for it was comfort, 7.5 out of 10, because the seating position's fine. The seat comfort is fine. But on long rides, when you have to adopt that standing position, it just kind of failed there, and just being slouched over with my shoulders wasn't comfortable. And also, when I'm going off-road, I want to be able to stand up on the foot pegs when the bumps get too tough, right? The bumps get too extreme, I want to stand up on the foot pegs, and yet I find myself slouched over with my shoulders down. I mean, I'm 6 foot tall, maybe someone short, I won't have that problem. But I definitely had that problem, and I didn't enjoy it at all. And when it comes to performance, 8 out of 10. 8 out of 10 because it provides great power, 34 horsepower for a single cylinder, which is capable of taking you from 0 to 100 in 7 seconds and a top speed of 143 kilometers per hour. Now that is great for a single cylinder, like come on. The Kawasaki Ninja 250, which has 2 cylinders, could only take me up to like 150 back in the day, 150, 160. So the BMW, they've done a great job with power, and that keeps the rider highly occupied. And efficiency, 8.5 out of 10, because I mean, that's not a bad fuel efficiency, 30 kilometers per liter with an 11 liter tank. That'll take you over 330 kilometers. Now that's not bad. And finally, when you combine everything that the BMW has to offer, drum roll please, drum roll, a riding enjoyment of 9 out of 10. That's what I experienced. I just couldn't get enough of this bike. It was so freaking fun to ride that I'm sure anyone would be willing to pay the extra 50,000 rupees or $1,000 that it's worth. But in Australia, the BMW and the Royal Enfield Himalayan are basically worth the same. They go for the same price. So I know which one I'll be buying. Drum roll please. Now when it comes to the final rating, I'm really excited and I have no regrets about handing this bike the award. The BMW G310GS with an overall rating of 8.25 out of 10 versus the Royal Enfield's 8 out of 10. It is the grand winner here. And it is the grand winner not because I'm biased in any way. Look at the specs. The specs are superior. And the specs agree with me in my experience when I'm riding out on the road and I'm just experiencing the enjoyment and the power and the handling and everything good there is to offer by the BMW that absolutely trumped the Royal Enfield. The BMW, it felt like an agile, nimble, Japanese bike. That's what it felt like. It felt like a Kawasaki Ninja 250 when it came to riding. Whereas the Royal Enfield Himalayan felt like a sluggish tractor, like an outdated tractor. Now, the off-road performance, just amazing. When it comes to off-road, it keeps chugging away like a tractor. Nothing can stop it. It'll even climb mountains. And that's what makes the Royal Enfield just as exciting, because it can climb mountains. But the problem is, before you can get to those mountains, you've got to get on the highway. And that's where the Royal Enfield Himalayan really let me down, because it's so boring. So in the end, guys, if you enjoyed this video, which I'm sure you did, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because there'll be plenty more coming. I'm going to be test riding, reviewing, going on long weekend rides on many more future motorcycles. I'm going to make some epic videos with my filmmaking skills. And if you guys want to come along for the adventure, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now and check out my future videos. And until next time, thank you.